4th June 1942. The Pacific Ocean, northwest of Midway Atoll. The morning sky is clear, broken only by scattered clouds drifting across an endless expanse of blue. Far below, Japanese warships cut through the water in perfect formation. Their crews move with confidence. For 6 months, the Imperial Japanese Navy has dominated the Pacific. Pearl Harbor lies behind them. Singapore has fallen. Allied forces have retreated across thousands of kilometers of ocean. From the decks of these ships, victory seems inevitable. Then, the first American aircraft appear. They arrive not in neat formations, but in desperate waves, scattered by distance, weather, and confusion. Japanese lookouts spot them almost immediately. Anti-aircraft guns begin firing. Fighters climb to intercept. One American squadron after another is torn apart. Aircraft plunge into the sea trailing smoke. Pilots disappear beneath the waves. For a moment, it appears that the Japanese fleet is untouchable. Then, just after 10:20 in the morning, dive bombers emerge from high above the clouds. Within minutes, the aircraft carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu are burning. Fires spread through hangars packed with fuel and armed aircraft. Explosions shake steel decks. Black smoke climbs thousands of meters into the sky. The destruction is astonishing. Yet what follows throughout the Pacific War becomes even more terrifying. Again and again, Japanese ships survive bombs, torpedoes, and shellfire, only to succumb to something far deadlier. Vast sheets of burning fuel raced through passageways. Ammunition detonated. Compartments became furnaces. Entire vessels transformed into floating infernos. Behind many of these disasters lies a weapon that receives far less attention than battleships, aircraft carriers, or atomic bombs. It is a weapon designed not merely to damage a ship, but to burn it from the inside out. This is the story of the American Navy's secret weapon against Japanese shipping. Incendiary warfare at sea, perfected through specialized bombs, aircraft attacks, and devastating fuel-fed fires that turned some of the most powerful warships ever built into blazing wrecks. By 1942, the United States faced an immense problem. The Imperial Japanese Navy possessed some of the most heavily armed warships on Earth. Battleships such as Yamato displaced more than 72,000 tons fully loaded and carried armor plates over 400 millimeters thick in critical areas. Even smaller cruisers and destroyers were designed to withstand considerable punishment. Traditional naval doctrine focused on sinking ships through flooding. Torpedoes punched holes below the waterline. Heavy shells smashed machinery spaces. The objective was straightforward: let the sea do the rest. Yet reality proved more complicated. Warships were remarkably resilient. Damage control teams trained relentlessly. Compartments could be sealed. Pumps removed water. Fires were extinguished. A vessel might absorb enormous punishment and continue fighting. American planners recognized a crucial weakness. Japanese warships depended upon vast quantities of aviation fuel, ammunition, lubricants, paint, timber fittings, electrical wiring, and other combustible materials. Aircraft carriers were especially vulnerable. Their hangars contained aircraft packed with fuel and explosives. Even battleships carried enough flammable material to sustain catastrophic fires. The challenge was reaching those vulnerabilities. Early bombs often penetrated decks before exploding. While this caused structural damage, it did not always produce the sustained infernos capable of overwhelming damage control efforts. Naval analysts began studying how fires spread aboard ships. Reports from Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and Midway revealed a consistent pattern. Ships that burned intensely often became impossible to save, no matter how much flooding occurred elsewhere. The conclusion was unsettlingly simple. A ship did not necessarily need to sink immediately. It only needed to burn. This insight drove the development and deployment of specialized incendiary weapons.
Engineers and ordnance experts within the Naval Ordnance Laboratory and various ammunition plants across the United States experimented with incendiary compounds capable of producing temperatures that conventional fires rarely achieved. One particularly important ingredient was napalm. Developed in 1942 by a team led by chemist Louis Pfizer at Harvard University, napalm transformed liquid fuel into a sticky gel. Instead of splashing away upon impact, burning fuel adhered to surfaces. It flowed into openings. It spread through compartments. Most importantly, it burned for extended periods. Imagine spilling ordinary petrol onto a metal surface. Much of it evaporates or runs off quickly. Napalm behaved differently. Its consistency resembled thick syrup or jelly. Once ignited, it adhered stubbornly to steel, wood, fabric, and paint. American incendiary bombs varied in size, but many weighed between 45 and 225 kilograms. Some combined explosive charges with incendiary fillings. The initial detonation ruptured structures and scattered burning material across wide areas. Aircraft attacking from altitude could blanket sections of a ship with dozens of separate ignition points. Manufacturing these weapons required a vast industrial effort. Chemical plants produced the necessary compounds. Bomb casings emerged from factories across multiple states. Assembly facilities filled, sealed, and prepared thousands of weapons for shipment overseas. Exact production figures remain difficult to establish because wartime records often grouped incendiaries into broader ordnance categories. However, millions of incendiary devices of various types were manufactured during the war. Tens of thousands eventually found their way into Pacific operations. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. By 1944, American forces possessed overwhelming air superiority across much of the Pacific. Carrier aircraft and land-based bombers repeatedly attacked Japanese naval units. During battles such as the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf, incendiary effects combined with conventional bombs and torpedoes to produce devastating results. Eyewitness accounts describe flames erupting from hangars, ventilation shafts, and ammunition spaces. Survivors reported temperatures so intense that paint blistered and steel bulkheads glowed. Damage control crews often found themselves fighting multiple fires simultaneously while under continued attack. The psychological effect was immense. Flooding could sometimes be controlled. Fire behaved differently. It spread unpredictably. Smoke reduced visibility. Heat exhausted crews. Communications failed. Ammunition detonated without warning. Records suggest that fear of uncontrollable fire became one of the greatest anxieties aboard Japanese warships during the latter years of the conflict. The Germans pursued their own incendiary technologies, particularly for strategic bombing campaigns. However, their naval applications remained comparatively limited. German anti-shipping efforts relied heavily on torpedoes, mines, and guided weapons such as the Fritz X. American incendiary warfare differed in both scale and integration. Rather than relying on a single specialized weapon, the United States combined explosives, incendiaries, aircraft attacks, and overwhelming operational pressure. A German guided bomb might destroy a ship through precision impact. American doctrine increasingly sought cumulative destruction. Repeated attacks ignited fires, disrupted repairs, exhausted crews, and eventually rendered ships helpless. British forces also employed incendiary weapons, particularly during bombing campaigns against German cities and industrial targets. Yet the Pacific presented unique circumstances. Long distances, carrier warfare, and heavily fuel-dependent naval operations created conditions in which fire became an especially effective weapon. What made the American approach distinctive was not simply the technology itself. It was the recognition that fire could serve as a strategic weapon against entire fleets. The impact of this innovation remains difficult to measure precisely because ships rarely result from a single cause. Ships burned because bombs struck fuel lines. Fires spread because damage control systems failed. Explosions occurred because ammunition was exposed to heat. Nevertheless, wartime analyses consistently identified fire as a decisive factor in the loss of numerous Japanese vessels. The material effects were obvious. Ships were destroyed, aircraft were lost, crews perished. The psychological effects may have been even greater. Every sailor understood that once a major fire gained control of a warship, survival became uncertain regardless of armor thickness or firepower. The lessons endured beyond 1945. Modern naval design places enormous emphasis on fire suppression, compartmentalization, and damage control. Contemporary warships incorporate systems specifically intended to prevent the kinds of catastrophic blazes witnessed during the Second World War. And so we return to that morning over the Pacific. Japanese sailors look upward and see tiny aircraft descending from impossible heights. Seconds later, explosions tear